the show because we have to see who accepts it. The
Okay.
stream has started. Twitch has accepted it. YouTube has accepted it. Facebook has accepted it. Now I'm going to put the timer on the screen.
Is it on there?
Where is the timer?
'Cause I still have mine too.
Here it is. Okay.
Okay.
So here, I'll take myself off and I'll put the timer in my place. Okay, so you can see the timer. It's got 5, the word 5. When that timer says on the air, you are on the air, okay?
Okay.
All right, here we go.
Thank you.
Let's go.
Peace and love. You are now listening to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center. I am your host, Deidra EmEl, Executive Director of the Western New York Peace Center. We'd like to say thank you to Richard Wicca, our producer and the producer of Think Twice Radio, and Buffalo State College, WBNY 91.3 FM. So without further ado, let's give our general thanks that we usually start our show with, and just giving thanks for the earth and the waters and the trees and the birds. I'd like to give thanks for the animals and living creatures, for human beings that are full of love and joy and light. We'd like to give thanks for the healing that goes through our air and through the organic elements, and the receiving of that healing process. I'd like to give thanks for the ants and the worms and the bees and all those creatures that are going to be hibernating and hiding in warmer places for the winter. We'd like to give thanks for our clouds and our, just elements in the skies, because we know about time and season and connection with that. So at the end of our Thanksgiving, we always end with Ashe and Yahweh and no. So thank you all for coming on the show with me. It's been a little bit of a while, so I'm really happy to be back in the seat. And I just want to give a shout out to some of our new co-hosts and our young students, and that's been helping us with the show, LaDeja Williams and Samaria and Billy. And they've been doing a great job in assisting us with the show. So you guys have been very great and awesome. So we have a couple of people on as our guests today. Today we're going to talk about contemplative practices and its effects on activism. Mm-hmm. And we have Dr. Sabrina N'Diaye, which is, she received her PhD in mind-body medicine from Saybrook University, where she studied the use of complementary and alternative interventions for physical, emotional, and spiritual growth. She's also a proud senior faculty member of the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, where she teaches the art of self-care, really to everyone around the globe that she can get her hands on, including the Buffalo community. I'm proud to say she is a sister and friend and collaborator with the Western New York Peace Center and myself personally. with embracing Buffalo and how we've been serving the Buffalo community since 514, and continually having her hands stretched wide with her team, coming to Buffalo and assisting in our healing process. So welcome, Dr. N'Diaye. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you, Deidra. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you for that opening prayer.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And so, and I have her on today, specifically to talk about this because this is what she does, as a social worker and as a therapist. This is what you're constantly involved in at different levels, from micro or the individual to macro or the world at large. So I also like to introduce Mr. Eigan Ball. He is the council member of the Buffalo Zen Dharma Community, which is a group of people in the Buffalo, New York area that has come together to learn about and practice Zen Buddhism, and offer this opportunity to others. They come together at Westminster Presbyterian Church, right here in the city of Buffalo, and they are affiliated with the Mountains and Rivers Order, located in Mount Trimper, New York. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you very much, Deidra. It's an honor to be here.
Very good. I'm glad you were able to come, and I would love for you to give, as we talk a little bit later in the show, give your experiences in Buddhism and meditation and other contemplative practices, and how that affects, the community at large.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'd be happy to do that.
Great. So, so my first question, I know I gave you all in what we are in our tradition. We usually say what values we want to bring to the table, to this discussion today. So anybody can kind of jump in and just say, I guess what's been on your mind, or what things you want to make sure that people, what can resonate for folks today.
I guess I can start, and I think what's on my mind right now, which is probably on most of our minds, is the reality that we're all connected. I am deeply saddened, and there's a different word for the emotions that I'm feeling right now, as a result of what's happening in the Middle East. I call Jerusalem the motherland. Like, she is everybody's mother. And I made Jerusalem a girl too, just so you know. Like, I went and sat down with her and I was like, "You are our mother." And she's like, "Yes, and none of you own me. Stop fighting over me." And I had that revelation like 6 years ago. And so the value, I think the biggest value that comes to me right now with this horrible power struggle that is being played out in the murder of countless of our mother's children, is the reminder that not only are we all connected, but we don't own anything. Everything has been loaned to us. And that's one of my values, is to always remember I don't own it, but I've been blessed with it to share.
That's right.
And so I'm just sitting with how I can convey that to other people in a way that lands in the right way for them.
Yes.
And then invite people to understand that we have an obligation. So that's what's coming up for me in this moment. I'm sure there's more, but I needed to start right there with what is happening at the center of so many religious, so many spiritual practices right now.
So I'd like to chime in by saying that, I totally agree that everything is a gift to us. It is a blessing, and we are all connected. I'm not you and you're not me, yet at the same time, we are completely joined together.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of how the earth is just a speck of dust, in the universe, and that speck of dust just happens to be the right distance from a star to allow an environment to form on it that sustains life. Any farther away and it would be too cold, any closer it would be too hot. It just is in the right place. And over time, it's developed into what we see today. And it's all interdependent.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we do affects everything else. It's all connected. It's a network. And so whatever, we need to be very careful about what it is that we think, what it is that we say, and what it is that we do, because it has consequences way beyond ourselves. And maybe not right now, but sometime later, it'll come into fruition for good or for bad.
Mm-hmm.
But we are definitely all connected. And from the Buddhist perspective, the three poisons are greed, anger, and ignorance. And ignorance is, one way to look at that is that ignoring the reality of things, how we are all connected. How can human beings that live on this speck of dust in this massive universe not be one family? I mean, and the way we behave is not, it's as though if our right hand was caught in a fire, the left hand says, I'm not going to help you. You're on your own. Pull yourself out of that thing. But that's ignoring the fact that the left and the right hand are all of one body. And it instinctively would grab it and rescue it and treat it. But we don't, if everybody behaved that way, it would be a different world.
Sure will. And I'm looking forward to that world. I think that, it's different sayings, but one in particular, of course, is, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and the pen is mightier than the sword. So the change of thoughts and ideas is, is the real war, to be conquered. Is, that's the war of the mind. And I think that's one of the things that I want us to kind of talk about, here today, because we're talking about things that are or practices that are helping to build an inner system of peace and tranquility and thoughtfulness. And what you just said about ignorance, to ignore reality, wow, that hit me like a ton of bricks. Because, a lot of us can say that, oh, I didn't know because, I was just ignorant of it. But sometimes we choose ignorance to kind of get out of that accountability on our parts, to the effect on the world at large, or our communities or our families and so on. So that's so very interesting. So as far as values, that I bring to the table is just understanding, like really thinking about how to understand understand one another and understand how to find your own inner solitude and peace to affect peace and change in the world. That's what I'm hoping, that, we kind of cultivate in this discussion tonight. Wow. Wow. So good. It's already good eating. Good, just consuming, you guys have so much to offer. I wanted to just bring out the definition, or a definition, and if y'all would like to express a little bit further on what contemplative practices are. So I looked it up just to find a basic definition for our audience. And this definition comes from the Center for Contemplative Mind in Society. It says, contemplative practices are practical, radical, and transformative, developing capacities for deep concentration and quieting the mind in the midst of the action and distraction that fills everyday life. This state of calm centeredness is an aid to exploration of meaning, purpose, and values. Contemplative practices can help develop greater empathy and communication skills, improve focus and attention, reduce stress, and enhance creativity, supporting a loving and compassionate approach to life. So what do y'all think about that definition, and how does it kind of relate to what you're already practicing in communities now, or sharing with, various communities?
Well, it's a nice goal, right? It's a glorious goal. I'm reminded of, I remember one time I went to see Tara Brach, and she said, we engage in spiritual practices so that we can always remember what we forgot. And that is really that sticks with me around my own contemplative practices. One thing I didn't tell you all, but every part of why I'm feeling Jerusalem so deeply is I'm the student of a Sufi master who lived his whole life in Jerusalem and was the custodian at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and had Christian, Jews, Muslims, everybody, believers, non-believers, sit at his feet and become his student. And one of the things that he taught us, he taught us so many things. One thing that he taught us was that there was going to be a time in which we really had to make some decisions about where we stood around humanity. And the practices that he taught us, somewhat connecting to your definition, he taught us would help us in making the right decision.
Okay.
And sometimes those decisions are not easy to make. And sometimes the words we have to speak are challenging to the tongue. So for me, one of the things that he taught us was something called remembrance. And in Sufism, remembrance, or dhikr, is literally a meditative practice of repeating one of God's qualities, and there's many: the compassionate, the merciful, the healer, the one who hears all, the one who listens. And then there's one to always remind us to not worship anything. And I find that to be the one that I have to rely on the most. And not worshiping anything includes being here on this show, having a PhD, having a title, like to not be attached to any of it as a form of worship. And my contemplative practice of repeating that is a way to keep bringing me back to my sense of purpose and back to the love. and to keep me away from those distractions, because I can get caught in, oh, I must be the blah blah of the blah blah. Who cares? Who cares? What am I? How am I serving humanity? Is what I want my contemplative practice to return me to. And how does it keep me like on the ground? And some of my practices literally involve me putting my head on the ground, so that I'm because the fourth one, Brother Ray, that I don't know if it's not on your list, but arrogance. That's the fourth one that I'm always working on, and I'm always guiding other people. So, I don't want to be ignorant. And I forget the other two, but they were all important. But even while you were talking, I was like, oh gosh, and don't forget the arrogance. So I engage in my contemplative practices so that I remember that I'm a small star and I'm a big star. And just like Brother Ray described, I never want to forget that I am a part of a vast continuum, a vast array of people. So my practices, I engage in all day, every day, some by myself and obviously some in community. And they're both relevant. And I'm sorry, I just talked too long, so I'm gonna let Brother Ray answer. And just so you know, I call everybody brother because Lord knows there's enough enemies going around.
Yes. No, it feels so nice to actually have to have you address me as and then I can think of you as my sisters. And I'm the oldest of 9, by the way.
Oh.
I have lots of brothers and sisters.
Nice.
The Zen school of Buddhism is known as the meditation school of Buddhism. And excuse me, the name for the practice is Zazen, or seated Zen. And it's essentially becoming familiar with our mind. It's an opportunity to step back out of the busyness of our lives and turn inward to discover who we are. Because from the time we were born, everybody is telling us who we are and who we should be. And, you're the talented one, you're the artistic one, you're the one who can't do this or you can't do that or something. And we buy these stories and then we live out this false self. And, so it becomes a journey of discovery to what is on the other side of all of this conditioning that we're sort of living out of, this false self. And we have, even Buddhism is a non-theistic practice. It's not against or denying God. It's just that the historical Buddha, the original teacher, said the suffering of mankind is created by mankind. So we're the ones who need to do something about it. In fact, we're the ones that have the power to do it because we're creating it. So, and we do this with our minds. So we need to be intimate with our minds. How does one study the mind? Well, to shut up and sit down and turn inward. And there are many different styles of meditation, but we start with something very basic of getting in touch with our breath, because it takes no ego to breathe. I mean, as long as we're alive, we're breathing. We don't have to do anything about it, and we don't manipulate the breath. If it's deep, it's deep. If it's not deep, it's not deep. From one breath to another, they're all unique. And so we focus our attention on our breath until a thought arises and captures our attention. We see that, we acknowledge it, we let it go, and we come back and make contact with the breath. So we're essentially bringing body and mind together. And then thought arises, renders it asunder, and we have the opportunity to, are we going to energize that thought and get on the train and leave the station? And, you know, but eventually we'll notice that we are out of touch with our breath. We let that go, that get off the train non-judgmentally. It's not right, it's not wrong, we're not broken. That's just how our mind works. It thinks. And we energize thoughts. So let it go and come back to the breath and begin again. And you know, this is the oneness of ourself, and the oneness, a reminder of the oneness of everything. So it's, you start to see when this, you know, what comes up. And to the extent that you can develop the ability to not energize those thoughts, it's not a lot of people think we're trying to stop the thinking. No, that's not the case. That's going in the wrong direction. Zazen is a subtractive process. We just let it go, let that thought go, and come back and make contact with the breath. It'll happen again. We see that, we let it go, we come back. It's not unlike going into a gym, picking up some weights and doing repetitions. You know, I mean, something is going to come of those repetitions. If we do them on a regular basis, we will build strength. And my original teacher, he said, if you can develop the ability to put your mind where you want it, when you want it, for as long as you want it, that will serve you in everything you do. It's not just a meditation practice, but meditation is sort of the training ground. And then this, you want to take that ability out into the world. And there's a lot more to this, but, you know, and then, because if you do start to get involved in activism, it helps to be able to put your mind where you want it, when you want it, and for as long as you want it, because it's not an easy thing to do.
No, and how easy it is to get distracted when you choose to go into activism work.
Yeah, it's very, you have so many needs, desires, wants, traumas, heartbreak, and it gets very overwhelming for the person who truly wants to help, quote unquote, and know where to start, where to pick up, you know, what broom to pick up, what, you know, what eye to dry, you know. It's just it's like despair all around you. And so either a person winds up trying to do everything and they get burned out, or they wind up doing nothing at all because they say, what's the use? You know? So I think that, again, finding that inner peace, and I'm saying inner peace is a simpler way for me to describe it, but it's more than just, you know, it's more than just inner peace. It's finding what's the word? Not a foundation, like a settling that, you know, I can do what I can, and taking that time out to think about what it is in your hands you can do, you know, how you can bring people into your space and circle to help them to heal, and how, you know, healing takes place. So let me ask you both about about people that have either gone through personal traumas or community traumas, what have you, and how these contemplative practices can help them through that. Reason why I ask that is because for activists, many people have gotten into activism usually because they've gotten angry or unsettled, about some injustice in life. Okay. So it's like a thought forward into this, fighting for what they understand is right. So there's a hurt there. There's a anger possibly, there's trauma possibly there. So, in social work, I know we usually say, you got the maimed or the hurt person that's trying to heal, other people. But I truly believe we have to heal, as healers in order to heal others. Does that make sense? We have to work on our own healing so that we're not approaching the situation. We can be trauma informed, but not trauma infused, so that we project our own trauma on others and say, this is your problem. I've been through the same thing, let me tell you, and we use it as a therapy session in trying to help other people. So going back to my question, how can these practices help people in trauma?
Well, it helps in like, I always think of healing like in three ways, with like a little triangle: physiological, physiological healing, emotional healing, and spiritual healing, right? But I begin everything with the premise that none of us get to escape this life without a traumatic life experience. Everyone is going to feel a time in their life in which they believe that they are in danger. And some of that trauma is prolonged and some of it is short. But the impact of it, even if it's a brief trauma, running for your life one time in a crowd, it could impact you forever. So a part of the reason why I teach practices and why I engage in practices is, you kind of asked two questions. So I'm going to answer the second part.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. So part of the reason why I teach the practices is I want people to understand, literally understand their nervous system. If you stay in that place, your sympathetic nervous system is going to be dominating your life, and you won't be able to make sound decisions, and your physical body cannot heal. And so these practices move your parasympathetic nervous system into dominating for at least the 5, 10 minutes, 50 seconds to start, so that your body can have a moment to reset, so that you can do what you are wanting to do, what you're destined to do. And even people who get into this work with a trauma history of their own, they also have to learn these practices, because if everything that they're doing is fueled by that anger, by that deep sorrow, by that separation, they too will not be able to do the kind of healing work that they really want to do. If your healing work is rooted in, I'm doing this because this happened to me and I hate so-and-so and so-and-so that contributed to that, that's not going to work to bring true healing. That's revenge. That's, like Brother Ray said, that might be some ignorance. Like my teacher said, that's false worship, because you're literally worshiping the revenge instead of worshiping the service. And so all these practices, and they can complement each other. You don't have to choose one or the other, can bring people into balance so they can make sound decisions, heal their bodies, and engage in action that are appropriate to them in the moment.
Wow. That's perfectly, put. So what are some of these contemplative practices that we speak of? I know Ray just talked about meditation or a type of meditation. But from what I'm learning is, there's so many different other contemplative or types of movement or rituals or what have you that we can do. So could y'all name a few that, you may be involved in or that you do within your groups?
Well, our group is strictly spiritual, actually. And I don't know, but I've been told by my teachers that there are some people that shouldn't practice meditation, that it can, and what I sort of imagine they're talking about is that if one has pushed a lot of things into the shadows, and then you engage in order to survive, so to have these things hidden away, although they're doing their work in the shadows for sure. But if you engage in a practice where you sit down and you're letting your mind settle of the practice of noticing it when it brings up a thought and just letting it go and then coming back again to the body, to the breath over and over again, because you're not energizing these thoughts that are arising, things will settle down. The Buddhist perspective is that the mind's natural state is actually clear and calm, like a body of water that is not ruffled. When wind and water mix, the surface does not reflect the reality in front of it. So if it's a clear night, the moon's out, but the water is riled up, there's 1,000 moons. It doesn't reflect the reality. So, and you can't see very deeply into it because the sediment is all wound up. But when you stop energizing the mind and let it settle to its natural calmness and clarity, then the surface will reflect the reality in front of it, and you can see deeply into it because the sediment has settled. So but to tie this back to where we started on this, making that space available for things to come out of the shadows could be terrorizing to someone who has lived their life by hiding things within themselves. Now, I'm not trained in psychology and stuff, so I'm on the border here of going too far, but.
Well, I think that's very interesting, and I wonder if the other types of practices can help them to clear, that type of darkness or those thoughts, whether it's through movement, dance, storytelling, or other art forms to kind of, deal with those thoughts, in a different manner than just, visualizing them or accepting them and letting go. I wonder, I don't know, but I would hope that they could find healing through a different type of practice, still in dealing with those inner thoughts and finding that inner peace. Did you have anything that you want to share about that, Sabrina, before we introduce our next guest?
Oh, well, yeah. So I think what Brother Ray said makes perfect sense. For some people, the stillness can be overwhelming. And And I also want to recognize how helpful it is for all of us to have a teacher, for all of us to have a guide, someone that we defer to, someone we respect, someone who can assist us and walk through this with us. And so in my tradition, we call it walking, and you need a guide to walk with you. And so as a therapist, I'm walking with people, and I literally tell people, I know you hear voices because you're alive. So I know there's voices. It doesn't mean you're crazy. So sometimes we engage in different activities to break up the power of those voices. And for some, sitting in deep contemplation and breathing, like Brother Ray described, works beautifully. And others, us shaking and moving and jumping up and down works wonders. And sometimes people come to me for therapy and we sing. Well, they sing. I'm a terrible singer. They won't listen to me sing. And sometimes I let them sing, or we engage in practices in which we tap into their imagination. Sometimes we talk to dead people. It's crazy. And all of these practices can complement each other. You know, particularly you're talking about activism. Sometimes I will sit with someone who is engaged in activism in the community, and we'll talk to a person that lived in who do you idolize? Whose story resonates with you? And it could be somebody from the 1800s. So let's just take a moment and breathe and see if we can bring in elements of that person into the space between us. What would Harriet Tubman want you to do about this moment right now? And so all of those practices, with the support of a guide, can be transformative because they can evoke very strong emotion. And so how can we support people in engaging in an activity that has the potential to bring in a strong emotional range and hold them in a loving embrace and let healing come through that sorrow, that pain, that frustration, those gut-wrenching tears that are also inherent in doing activism work. Because you can't tell anybody to do this work and for them to expect not to cry. They will cry. They will cry. And if they're not crying, they're breaking something. So I much prefer they cry. I cry every day. There's no way around it for me. So.
And I think it's so helpful. Yeah, it's important, of course, for you as healers in your community to practice, right? And I'm learning a lot more about that as I'm going through some of the courses at Center for Mind Body Medicine, and learning how important it is for me to do a daily practice for me, to not, as the Bible says, not only be, hearers of the word, but doers as well, right? And so being a practice, a practitioner is a whole nother story. And, but it gives you so much more understanding on how to share with others, how to go about their own healing process. So at this time, I wanted to introduce Dr. Rima Vesely-Flad. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. It's so great to join you.
I'm so glad you're able to make it. I know you've had a long day already. And we just wanted you to just pop in with us for a few minutes. Dr. Rima is the author of Black Buddhist and Black Radical Tradition, the Practice of Stillness in the Movement for Liberation. And she's also the author of Racial Purity and Dangerous Bodies, Moral Pollution, Black Lives, and the Struggle for Justice. She leads retreats and classes for Dharma centers throughout the U.S. She's the visiting professor at Buddhism and Black Studies at Union Theological Seminary. I think I already said that, sorry. And she will be our keynote speaker for the Western New York Peace Center's annual dinner this year. So we're so excited to have you on. And we just wanted to continue a little bit of the conversation. We've been talking, before you came on, we've been talking about what our contemplative practices, how they affect the individual and communities at large that may have dealt with trauma, from the individual to the community, and how does it play in activism, and with those who want to be engaged in social justice work. I just want see if you wanted to jump in on that conversation, and maybe talk about your angle on these things.
It's been actually the conversation I'm having. Actually, just did a 90-minute event all about embodiment and sensuality in Buddhism. And so much of what we talked about is how to work with the body's energies and how to work with our senses, and how to really pay attention to this, what we call the first foundation of mindfulness, which is mindfulness of the body. And it follows on the last public event I did for Union that was more oriented towards the student body, which was all about mindfulness of the body. And we danced. We brought in 5 songs, myself and another professor, in the chapel space. And the songs evoked grief and anger and just so much. And the practice then was to really pay attention to our bodies and to move. And all of that is kind of sandwiched between this commitment to reading a book called Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness, which came out a couple of years ago, which also advocates in multiple ways the fact that for so many of us, because of inherited trauma, because of harsh experiences we've had ourselves, our bodies are not necessarily safe, but they don't feel safe. So sitting is a very important practice for some of us, but not necessarily accessible for all of us. And yet that's not the only conduit to mindfulness of the body, the first foundation of mindfulness. And the idea is that we pay attention to our bodies. We get to know our bodies. There are various practices to really attune to our bodies. We so often are in our heads. We have thoughts, to-do lists, conversation narratives, things that have happened to us 10 years ago and how that brings up something that happened to us yesterday. And all of that's in our heads. And so the practice is to drop into our bodies and to find very skillful ways to do that. But it doesn't necessarily suggest sitting. That's one form of contemplative practice or one form of mindfulness of the body. It also suggests that we can move. And in my tradition, actually, there's a lot of walking meditation. And you may know of the Vietnamese Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, who's known as the father of socially engaged Buddhism and is responsible for coining that phrase. And he worked with Vietnamese refugees. And in his tradition, there's a lot of walking, and it's because of moving trauma through the body and being able to really move the intensity of those experiences in such a way that it's still practice, it's still mindfulness, but it's not only sitting. And I think it's important for us to disrupt that idea as we are working with people who have a lot of inherited trauma or who live in a context who have had experiences in which their bodies don't feel safe. So this is actually a very present conversation for me. It's something I've been thinking a lot about and have been really experimenting with in my role as a Dharma teacher.
Wow. And I'm personally, dance is what resonates with me. It has definitely been a healing. I love the word that you use, conduit, of healing and spirit. And so I connect a lot with movement. And I've noticed that I'm one of those people. It's not that I have, dark thoughts kind of going through when I'm sitting still, but I need to move. Like I have this I have a lot of energy within. I don't always have a lot of energy without. A lot of energy moving on the inside, and I need to move it, so I need to walk. I need to move my body, and I feel, walking meditation really speaks to me, but then I say, well, if I need to walk, maybe I need to sit. If I'm so nervous I can't sit still, maybe I have to practice sitting still for a while. I remember watching one of your other interviews, and you said it took you maybe 2 years to learn how to just sit still and, do the basic meditation.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. Well, 2 years for the mind to settle. I mean, 2 years of just like, the way I think of it is it's like opening the pantry door and everything comes tumbling out. You spend the entire meditation picking things up. That's there, that's there, that's there, that's there. You're just naming. Like, my mind is so intense and full and crazy. And, there was a lot of grief. There was a lot of shame. There was a lot of self-hatred for many years. And just being able to turn towards that and tap into it was such an intense, very hard practice. I'd say practice is hard. It requires a lot. It's not to say we can't do it. We can absolutely do it. But to be able to turn to what our minds produce or how our minds react and just see it without judgment, without any kind of,
right then and there.
What's that?
So we're trying to fix it right then and there.
Trying to fix it, trying to change it. I mean, even just noticing like something appears and the feelings that come up, like, oh, I said that thing, you're remembering that thing. And then all of the associated feelings of shame or embarrassment or what have you took 2 years to just settle. Like I came on just as there was a conversation about sediment settling and, kind of clear water. 2 years. I mean, it was hard. But one thing I will say that I think is also so important in this conversation is the importance of developing or cultivating compassion so that there's a container. So as much as we talk about working with the body and moving, letting whatever is happening not get stuck or, not paralyze us or not provoke so much anxiety, we feel like we want to jump out of our skin. We also have to create safety for ourselves. We have to cultivate that. And so for me in my own practice, knowing so much of what my mind can produce, it was really important to be in a tradition in which compassion practices are central. So I actually initially started out in a Zen community and I learned discipline. And I sat long, I would do these 10-hour zazenkai, long days of just sitting, a little bit of walking, mostly sitting. And that discipline was important. I could see what was happening in my mind. But actually, when I moved to another stage of practice and where I really felt myself start to develop a deeper relationship with what my mind was producing was when I moved to the insight tradition, as it's known here in this context. It's rooted in Southeast Asia, the Buddhist traditions of Burma and Thailand and Sri Lanka. But within that tradition, there's a practice called the Brahma Viharas, and it refers to loving kindness and equanimity and a couple of other practices. And that practice of cultivating loving kindness and just whatever the mind produces, being able to, without judgment, but also with some tenderness, approach whatever the mind was producing was really important. It was really critical for being able to kind of stabilize internally, become a more stable personality.
It's so interesting that you say that, because that brings us back to what Sabrina talked about at the very beginning of our discussion with the recent happenings in Israel, and how we're all interconnected, and so bringing us back to this idea of compassion is so very interesting. Like you said, it's just right on the path. We're all walking the same path. And Sabrina, what did you just think about what Rima was talking about, and with compassion being involved in our practice?
Well, I think it's critical for us to hold ourselves with compassion, obviously trying to do this work. And only through that compassion can we hold others. And so I don't know which one comes first, compassion for others or compassion for ourselves. But if our compassion for ourselves isn't there, I think Buddha said that it's incomplete. Did Buddha say that, or Jack Kornfield? I think Jack's getting credit for it, but I like it.
Well, it comes from somewhere.
It's a good one, though, right? It's a good one. If your compassion doesn't include yourself, it's incomplete. And as people who are, those of us striving to be peace builders, we are called to lead, and then we're also called to really learn to harness that compassion so that we can give it, and also not just give it, to fall in love with the people who challenge us. Peace building is challenging work. We are all being challenged right now to have compassion for two warring countries.
Yeah.
Compassion for mothers who are burying their children. So in order to really hold these two places in compassion, and also seeing the injustice, like I can see both. And I can see what's been going on for all these years. I have visited that part of the world. I have sat with people in so many different places, and I know the struggle that so many people have experienced, and I know the history. And so having a practice of practicing compassion within then allows me to sit with them without the judgment, without the blame, but with a desire to really see peace come through these horrible cracks. And we don't have to go to Jerusalem for this. We can be right in Buffalo for this.
Right.
Witness is still working through holding ourselves with compassion, holding people from different races, different religions in compassion, while we still try to heal from the Jefferson Massacre.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And what a struggle that is. So these practices don't eliminate the struggle. It just allows us to move with greater ease and to be a part of how we all have to heal, and to know that the healing is going to take our whole life.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to die with something we still need to heal from.
Darn it.
I know. It's our whole life.
Yeah.
Our whole life. But then to be able to witness it and say, I did do that. I have healed from that.
Right. Well, we already are coming to the end of our show. Such a good conversation. I don't want us to end.
It's okay.
But really quickly, I wanted to go around and make sure we get the information out to our audience of what's happening, who's doing what, and how people can get more involved in what we're doing. So, and I wanted to have a quick shout out with Ray and connect you to Rima officially, because you have some of the same starts with the Zazen Buddhism, the monastery, Ray?
Yes, in the temple in Brooklyn. I've been there. I taught a class on contemplative photography at the school. That's a contemplative practice that I'm involved in. And I taught that at Fire Lotus. So Shuken Roshi sends his best wishes, and he's very excited about coming to Buffalo. And we're trying to bring him here in January. He's committed to come to Buffalo. It's been, he was doing it once a year, but COVID broke that string. And so we were reestablishing it. But it was so delightful to find out that you had spent time at Fire Lotus.
I sure did. That was when I mentioned I started in a Zen community. That was the community I sat for a year, learned very rigorous discipline, and I grew a lot. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so Ray is a council member at the Buffalo Zen Dharma Community here in Buffalo. And what days can people, you have visitor days, right? Or new member days? What days are those?
Right.
Where can they get more information?
We meet once a week on Tuesday evenings. However, we have a separate newcomer program for folks on the first Tuesday of every month.
Okay.
And they can find more information at buffalozen.org. So BUFFALOZEN.org.
Wonderful.
Would give them the instructions on how to get in the queue for that. And it's very much Rima, of what it's like at the temple, except that we're in a Presbyterian church parish hall. We have a pop-up Zendo every Tuesday night, and about 20 people there. And we start with we do a liturgical service. We sit zazen. We do walking meditation in between, and then every other week we play a Dharma talk by one of the teachers. So last night we heard from Hojin Sensei.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Ray. And Dr. Sabrina, now you have a new book coming out, and you will be doing some book sharings around our dinner. So the same week of the dinner. What is the name of your book, and how can they get more information about what you're going to be doing here in Buffalo? Because you're in Baltimore, Maryland right now, but you will be.
I'm in Baltimore, but I'm going to be sitting down listening to Sister Rima talk on Friday.
Very much so.
I'm looking forward. That's that's one of the reasons why I'm coming up, and to support the West New York Peace Center. And so, and my book is secondary to those goals. But I mentioned earlier about talking to the dead, and who's really dead. There's no such thing, right? But my book is about how I dialogued on paper in my journal to my deceased maternal grandmother who suffered horrible trauma, and how her teachings taught me to be a peace builder, to be a leader, to live this life to the best of my capacity. And so it's a bunch of little short stories, little essays. I call it my tiny mighty book. You can finish it in a day and come back to it when you want to. But the title is Big Mama Speaks: Love Lessons from a Harlem River Swan. And my intention is to do some readings the night before your big event, and to have an event in Buffalo the day after, and in keeping with our desire to continue to embrace Buffalo. That's the project we started after the Jefferson Massacre, and it's a project that we're committed to for as long as you'll have us.
That's right. That's right. And this is, and the dinner is, I would say, one of those love childs, and building one of our visions of helping people find inner healing and inner peace so that they can create more peace, in the world. So we would like to just thank you all for listening. Remember to go to WNYPC.org to get your tickets for our 56th annual dinner. contemplative practices, and the Dharma, the Dharma of I'm sorry. Rima, can you give us the title? Your title
I
for
think
the
it's the Dharma of Racial Justice, Contemplative Practices and Social Activism.
Thank you.
Does
I was
that sound
just tongue-tied. I would not come. Thank you. So that will be November 10th from 5 to 9, WNYPC.org to get more information. Thank you so much, Dr. Rima, Dr. Sabrina, and Ray for joining us today. And you have been listening to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, and we have been talking peace in love and in truth. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all.
Thank you.
You.